The morning river is still, broken only by faint currents curling around half-submerged logs. A soft mist hovers above the surface, rising in pale ribbons toward the forest canopy. But that tranquility is an illusion. Beneath the surface, the system is tense, waiting. Fish shoals hold together in a nervous press, caimans linger watchfully along the banks, and even the herons, usually silent in their long patience, seem restless. The reason soon reveals itself in a sound that cuts across the water, sharp, staccato barks in unison, an unmistakable signature of power. The giant otters have arrived. 6 feet of rippling muscle and dense waterproof fur, the giant otter is not simply an oversized version of its northern relatives. In the Amazon, size is not a luxury, it is a weapon, an adaptation to an environment where everything is exaggerated: predators, prey, floods, and hunger. Each member of the family is built like a torpedo, streamlined for speed and endurance, with webbed paws that beat the current like oars. Their eyes and nostrils sit high on the skull, a periscope design honed by millions of years of aquatic life. Yet what makes these animals extraordinary is not any single feature, but the system they form when together. Alone, an otter is vulnerable. Together, they are an apex force, a team that rewrites the rules of the river. The family unit is their empire. A breeding pair, bonded for life, leads the group, but every member contributes to the defense and survival of the clan. Unlike many carnivores that tolerate loose associations, giant otters demand cohesion. They move, hunt, and rest as a synchronized force, weaving complex calls into a vocal tapestry. Researchers have documented more than a dozen distinct sounds: alarm barks, contact whines, rallying hums, and aggressive growls. To the human ear, it may sound chaotic, but to the otters, it is orchestration, a living language that directs collective action with precision. This unity gives them leverage against rivals far larger than themselves. A solitary caiman, basking in the shallows, is formidable to most creatures, but not to a patrol of giant otters. They do not merely confront the reptile, they overwhelm it. Barking in chorus, the group surges from the water, snapping jaws and swiping paws. Their tactics are deliberate: distract from multiple angles, probe for weakness, drive the intruder back into deeper water. In these encounters, blood is rarely drawn, because the otter's strategy is intimidation through momentum. The caiman withdraws not from injury, but from a recognition that the odds have turned against it. The enforcers of the river have spoken, yet enforcement comes at a cost. A giant otter family consumes several kilograms of fish per day, each individual requiring constant intake to fuel its high metabolic rate. Unlike reptiles, which can go days or even weeks between meals, mammals burn energy relentlessly. Their warm-blooded physiology demands thermoregulation in waters that can sap body heat despite tropical air temperatures. Dense fur, composed of the thickest hair in the animal kingdom, helps insulate them, but insulation alone is not enough. Food is the true fuel of survival. Every fish caught not only replenishes calories, but sustains the heat that allows their muscles to remain explosive and their brains sharp. In this way, predation is not a luxury, but a physiological necessity. The ecological ripples of this need are profound. Fish populations in the otter's territory shift in both distribution and behavior, subtly but consistently altered by the presence of their hunters. Shoals learn to avoid certain stretches of river, forcing weaker individuals toward the margins where herons and cormorants wait. Smaller predatory fish, sensing reduced competition in otter-heavy zones, expand their feeding grounds, reshaping the dynamics of invertebrate populations downstream. In this way, the otters function not only as predators but as regulators, their hunger cascading through multiple trophic levels, altering who eats, who survives, and who must adapt. Territory is both a resource and a battleground. Giant otters scent mark conspicuously, dragging their bodies along sandbanks and defecating at communal latrines. To outsiders, these signals are a bold warning. This stretch of river is already claimed, and intrusion will be met with force. Conflict between neighboring clans can be violent, echoing the social wars of primates or wolves. Clashes often erupt when food resources shrink during the dry season, when floodplains retreat and fish are confined to shrinking pools. These moments of compression reveal the harsh arithmetic of survival. The group that can maintain cohesion and repel rivals secures the resources to endure. The weaker clan splinters, its members forced into marginal habitats where predation by caiman, jaguar or anaconda becomes a looming threat. For all their cooperative strength, giant otters live in a world where failure is punished swiftly. But survival strategies do not end with brute force. The giant otter's intelligence is visible in their problem-solving behaviors. They adjust hunting techniques to the nature of prey, ambushing catfish from below, driving shoals of karakins toward shallow corners, or using coordinated dives to confuse armored prey like piranhas. Observers have noted that younger otters often imitate adults, learning techniques through play that gradually transitions into practice. This cultural transmission, the passing of learned behavior rather than instinct alone, marks them as complex social mammals, closer in learning style to primates or dolphins than to most carnivores. It is here, in the space between biology and culture, that their evolutionary genius lies. Even the moments of apparent leisure are strategic. When pups are born, the entire group invests in their care. Adults take turns guarding the den, fetching food, and teaching survival skills. This cooperative breeding system ensures that young are not simply the offspring of the dominant pair, but the collective investment of the family. In evolutionary terms, it raises the odds that genetic material shared across siblings is carried into the future. In ecological terms, it strengthens the unit, ensuring that each new generation inherits both skills and territory. The continuity of knowledge is as critical as the continuity of bloodline. Yet the giant otter's role in the river is not just biological, it is also psychological. The sound of their calls alters the behavior of other species. Capybaras feeding along the bank freeze at the barks of a patrol, recognizing the sign of potential danger even though otters rarely prey on them. Birds lift from the water's edge when a hunting group surfaces, perhaps wary of a sudden commotion that could draw larger predators. Even caimans, armored and ancient, adjust their basking sites to avoid frequent confrontation. In this way, the otter's influence extends beyond the calories they consume. They generate a landscape of fear, a constant psychological presence that forces other species to calculate risk. Humans, too, have felt this presence. Indigenous communities across the Amazon respect and sometimes fear the giant otter, referring to them in folklore as river demons or water spirits. Their piercing eyes and fearlessness toward larger animals gave rise to stories of protectors and tricksters, beings that could control fate along the river. These myths, while not scientific accounts, reveal an ancient truth. Humans recognized early that the otters were not merely animals, but forces, regulators of balance in a system too vast to tame. As the sun climbs higher, the otter family drifts downstream, their movements synchronized as if choreographed. Each dive, each bark, each flick of a tail is part of a larger rhythm, one that keeps the river in check. They are not the largest hunters here, nor the strongest individually, but they wield a weapon more formidable than size: unity. In a world of solitary stalkers and ambush predators, cooperation becomes its own form of dominance. The river's enforcers patrol not just with teeth and claws, but with the weight of collective will. In the end, their legacy is not measured in the number of fish they consume or the rivals they chase away. It is measured in the shape of the ecosystem itself, in the altered behaviors of prey, the shifted patterns of rivals, and the continuity of generations that inherit both strength and strategy. To watch giant otters is to witness a rare experiment in evolution. What happens when survival favors not the lone hunter, but the team? The answer is written here in the restless waters of the Amazon, where a chorus of voices declares sovereignty, and the river listens. The Amazon at dusk becomes a theater of shadows. Light drains quickly from the forest, leaving the river in a muted palette of grey and green. In the fading glow, the surface looks still, but beneath, the water is thick with motion, fish darting, crustaceans burrowing, amphibians surfacing for air. Yet, in this crowded stage, silence takes on a different weight. It signals the presence of something other creatures would rather not encounter. Somewhere in the gloom, a predator is waiting, one that hunts not with teeth or speed alone, but with an invisible force that changes the very physics of life in water. The electric eel is in position. Despite its name, the electric eel is not an eel at all, but a knife fish, more closely related to ghost knife fish than to the true eels of the ocean. It is long and muscular, reaching lengths of over 2 meters, with a body built less for bursts of speed than for endurance in stagnant, oxygen-poor backwaters. Its elongated form hides a physiology unlike any other top predator in the Amazon. More than 4/5 of its body is devoted to electricity-generating cells known as electrocytes, modified muscle cells stacked like living batteries. In isolation, each electrocyte produces a tiny voltage, but when aligned in sequence, the effect multiplies. The eel carries within its body a weapon of up to 860 volts, the strongest bioelectric discharge known in the animal kingdom. This weapon is not used indiscriminately. The eel deploys electricity in distinct modes, almost as if it were operating a living arsenal with multiple settings. Low-voltage discharges ripple continuously from its body, creating an electrical field that maps the environment. In the muddy waters where visibility drops to nothing, vision is almost irrelevant. Instead, the eel sees with electricity, detecting the distortions caused by nearby fish, tree roots, or stones. This active electrolocation is so sensitive it can distinguish the difference between living and non-living objects, reading the world in 3-dimensional currents invisible to human eyes. But when it hunts, the eel switches to a different register. It fires high-voltage volleys in rapid doublets, paired pulses so precisely timed that they hijack the nervous system of its prey. These pulses override the normal signals traveling from brain to muscle, causing involuntary contractions. A fish that moments before was poised to flee suddenly convulses, its body betrayed by its own neurons. Immobilized, it drifts helplessly toward the predator's waiting jaws. To watch this interaction is to see physiology itself become a weapon, evolution bending the laws of neurology in the eel's favor. Even larger prey is not beyond reach. When threatened by a caiman or an intrusive human hand, the eel has been documented leaping from the water to deliver shocks directly into the air. In this position, its chin presses against the attacker, turning the entire length of its body into a conductor. The current surges through the intruder, using the river surface as a ground. To the victim, the sensation is overwhelming, an all-encompassing jolt that forces retreat. This extraordinary behavior reveals the eel's tactical adaptability. Electricity is not just for subduing prey, but for defending territory against formidable adversaries. Yet such power does not come cheaply. The eel's reliance on electrocytes means that its musculature for conventional swimming is reduced. Unlike streamlined predators such as piranhas or giant otters, the electric eel is not built for sustained chases. Instead, it lurks in slow waters, oxbow lakes, flooded forests, and sluggish tributaries, where its sensory advantage is maximized. In these dim arenas, speed matters less than control. By using electricity to dictate the movement of others, the eel levels the playing field. Predation here is not about pursuit, but about manipulation. The river's ecology bends subtly under this influence. Prey fish alter their activity cycles, shifting to times and places where electric eels are less common. Some species cluster in schools more tightly, hoping that safety in numbers dilutes the odds of an electrical strike. Others adapt in quieter ways, reducing movement in murky waters to avoid detection by electrolocation. In this sense, the eel functions as an electrical architect of the river, structuring community behavior through fear as much as through direct predation. Just as the giant otter reshapes the river with its cooperative force, the electric eel redefines it with invisible grids of power. Survival for the eel requires more than hunting prowess. Unlike most fish, it breathes air. Every 10 minutes or so, it surfaces with a gulp, filling its vascularized mouth cavity with oxygen. This adaptation is vital in stagnant backwaters where dissolved oxygen levels plummet, especially during the dry season when pools shrink and organic decay consumes what little remains. Where other fish suffocate, the eel thrives, monopolizing habitats that become death traps for its competitors. This simple physiological adjustment, tied to its electrical weaponry, allows it to dominate ecological niches unavailable to most predators. Reproduction adds another dimension to its life history. Males construct bubble nests, small floating platforms of foam anchored among vegetation. Into these fragile structures, females deposit thousands of eggs, which the males guard vigilantly. In the still waters of flooded forests, where currents are weak, these nests provide oxygenated refuges for embryos. The act of nest building may seem at odds with the eel's violent hunting strategies, but it illustrates a broader truth of survival. Dominance in the Amazon requires not only raw power, but also meticulous investment in the next generation. Without such care, the cycle of enforcement would collapse. For all its adaptations, the electric eel's most remarkable feature remains its ability to weaponize physics. Electricity is a universal constant, a force that underpins the operation of every nerve and muscle in the living world. By learning to exploit this constant, the eel has tapped into a vulnerability present in all its prey, the reliance on electrical signals to coordinate movement. Its shocks do not tear flesh or crush bones, but they short-circuit the very machinery of life. In a system where most predators use mechanical force, the eel uses disruption, a kind of biological hacking that takes advantage of shared physiology. It is not an exaggeration to say that the electric eel changed the rules of predation itself. Even in death, its influence persists. Indigenous peoples long observed that waters containing dead electric eels seemed to repel predators, and some communities incorporated the eel into rituals of protection and medicine. In modern science, the eel's electrocytes inspired early studies of bioelectricity, shaping our understanding of how neurons transmit signals. The creature that terrifies fish in the Amazon's murky backwaters has indirectly illuminated the workings of human brains across the globe. Its legacy is therefore not confined to the jungle. It stretches into laboratories, textbooks, and even medical devices that use electricity to restore movement or regulate heartbeats. As night deepens, the eel resumes its silent patrol. The forest hums with frogs and insects, but the river is subdued. Prey fish keep to cover, wary of invisible pulses. Now and then, a sudden thrash at the surface betrays the moment of a strike. A flash of convulsing scales, a ripple of disturbed water, then stillness again. The predator disappears into shadow, leaving only the uneasy quiet that signals its passing. In this darkness, electricity rules, and the eel is its undisputed master. Its role in the Amazon system is more than that of predator. It is a regulator of fear, an architect of behavior, a reminder that power in nature comes in many forms. Where the jaguar relies on muscle and the anaconda on stealth, the electric eel wields a force invisible but absolute. To enter its world is to enter a grid without wires, a living network where every movement carries the risk of being intercepted by currents no eye can see. This is the shock grid of the river, a domain patrolled not with claws or teeth, but with lightning born from flesh. Dawn filters slowly into the Amazon rainforest, a muted light softened by layers of mist and canopy. The night chorus of frogs and insects begins to fade, replaced by the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of monkeys, and the shifting splash of fish in oxbow lakes. Beneath this soundscape, a deeper rhythm moves, the quiet tread of the forest's largest land mammal. The South American tapir emerges from shadow, its dark, barrel-shaped body pushing aside foliage as it steps into a muddy clearing. It is not a predator, nor a fighter, nor a territorial sentinel, yet its influence runs deeper than most carnivores. This animal is the gardener of the Amazon, a living architect of regeneration. At first glance, the tapir appears almost prehistoric. Its heavy frame, rounded ears, and short, trunk-like snout suggest an animal from another era, and in truth, its lineage does stretch back tens of millions of years. It is one of the few survivors of an ancient group of herbivores that once roamed continents before the ice ages reshaped the earth. In the modern Amazon, it can reach 250 kilograms, dwarfing deer and peccaries, and standing as the undisputed heavyweight of the jungle floor. Yet despite its size, it moves with surprising silence, threading through dense vegetation with the patience of an animal that has spent millennia learning how to pass unnoticed. This ability to vanish into the forest is no accident. The tapir's primary defense is not aggression but discretion. Its muted coloring blends into shadow, its movements are deliberate and slow, and its skin, thick and coarse, provides protection against undergrowth and insect bites. When threatened, it can flee with startling bursts of speed, plunging headlong into rivers or swamps, where its strong swimming skills give it an escape route most predators hesitate to follow. Jaguars and pumas are the only consistent hunters bold enough to take one down, and even then, the encounter is dangerous for both. For most of the forest's inhabitants, the tapir is less an opponent than a presence, a quiet force that shapes landscapes in ways few predators could. The key to its role lies in its diet. Tapirs are generalist feeders, browsing on fruits, leaves, twigs, and aquatic vegetation. Their flexible snouts act like short proboscises, plucking berries from shrubs or pulling up tender shoots. They are especially fond of fallen fruit, which they consume in large quantities, swallowing seeds whole. Here, the story of the tapir becomes the story of the forest itself. As the animal roams across vast distances, often several kilometers in a single night, it carries those seeds within its digestive tract. Hours later, deposited with nutrient-rich dung, the seeds are given both dispersal and fertilizer in a single package. Some seeds even require the passage through a tapir's gut to break down their tough outer coats, activating germination. In effect, the tapir is not merely a consumer of plants, but their courier and benefactor. The impact of this dispersal cannot be overstated. Many Amazonian trees produce large seeds too heavy for wind or small animals to carry far. Without dispersers like tapirs, these seeds would fall close to the parent tree, where they are more likely to be eaten by insects, infected by fungi, or shaded out by competition. By scattering them across riverbanks, forest edges, and even into new floodplains, tapirs ensure genetic diversity and colonization of new ground. Over centuries, their foraging paths become regeneration corridors, subtle lines of green that stitch together fragmented habitats. In a rainforest increasingly pressured by deforestation and fragmentation, the tapir's role as a seed disperser becomes not just beneficial, but essential. Observing the tapir's nightly wanderings reveals how it stitches ecosystems together. In dry seasons, when food in the understory dwindles, it ventures to river margins and flooded basins, feeding on aquatic plants and fruits dropped by gallery trees. When rains swell the rivers, it swims across channels, ferrying seeds from one bank to the other. Few other large animals so consistently bridge the gap between terrestrial and aquatic zones. In doing so, tapirs create ecological continuity. They are living links between water and forest, between one stretch of canopy and another, carrying regeneration in their digestive systems. This quiet engineering has evolutionary consequences. Plants that rely on tapirs for dispersal, some with seeds the size of golf balls, have shaped their fruiting cycles around the animal's feeding habits. Certain tree species exhibit higher survival rates in areas with healthy tapir populations, while in regions where tapirs have been hunted out, regeneration falters. Forests without tapirs lose some of their resilience, diversity thins, and corridors of new growth fail to establish. In this sense, the absence of a gardener leaves the system vulnerable to collapse. Yet the tapir's importance is not only ecological, but physiological. Its digestion, adapted for fermenting fibrous plant material, is a slow process that allows seeds to survive intact for long distances. Its body mass enables it to consume fruits too large for smaller herbivores. Its semi-aquatic tendencies allow it to colonize floodplains others rarely reach. Each of these adaptations is a piece of an evolutionary puzzle that places the tapir in a niche no other Amazonian animal quite fills. Evolution has sculpted it into a carrier of forests, a four-legged ark bearing the genetic future of plants with every journey. Despite this vital role, the tapir remains a paradox in the human imagination. It is both celebrated and overlooked. Indigenous groups often revere it as a symbol of fertility and abundance, recognizing its link to forest renewal. Yet in many regions, it is also heavily hunted for meat, its slow reproduction making populations highly vulnerable. A female tapir gives birth to a single calf after more than a year of gestation. The young, born with striking white and brown stripes and spots, resemble miniature watermelons, camouflage that helps them hide in dappled light. For months they rely on the mother's vigilance and milk before beginning to forage independently. With such low reproductive rates, the loss of adults from hunting or habitat destruction can ripple for decades, stalling regeneration not only of the species, but of the forest communities that depend on them. In broader ecological terms, tapirs belong to a rare class of species known as megafaunal seed dispersers. Alongside elephants in Africa and Asia, and rhinoceroses in parts of Asia, they serve as keystone gardeners, moving seeds too large for smaller dispersers. Many plant lineages that evolved during the Pleistocene depended on massive herbivores like ground sloths and gomphotheres. When those giants vanished, the tapir inherited their role, one of the last living echoes of a world populated by megafauna. Its survival is therefore not just a matter of conserving one animal, but of preserving a functional link to deep evolutionary history. As dusk settles again, and the rainforest folds into shadow, the tapir returns to the water. It slips into the shallows with little sound, its nostrils flaring as it takes a long breath. Fish scatter from its entry, but the animal ignores them, focusing instead on tender shoots along the banks. In this scene, the forest's future is already unfolding. Seeds consumed, seeds carried, seeds soon to be sown in places unseen. Each journey extends the web of life, carrying resilience into tomorrow's canopy. The gardener of the Amazon is not loud, nor swift, nor fierce. It shapes its kingdom not through fear, but through patience, movement, and endurance. By turning hunger into renewal, it transforms consumption into creation. If the jaguar is the shadow of death in the jungle, the tapir is the quiet promise of rebirth. To protect it is to protect the forest's ability to regenerate itself. To lose it is to watch corridors of green unravel, one missed seed at a time. The canopy of the Amazon is an empire suspended in air. Branches weave into highways of green, leaves stretch to catch the first and last light of day, and animals move through it as if the ground scarcely exists. Monkeys leap from branch to branch, sloths crawl deliberately along lianas, and macaws flash scarlet and cobalt against the sky. From the forest floor, the canopy feels untouchable, a living roof too high to be reached. Yet even here, in this world of perpetual motion and abundant foliage, there is a sovereign presence, a ruler that governs with silence, shadow, and precision. The harpy eagle is watching. It is a bird of paradoxes. Enormous, with a wingspan of over 2 meters and talons longer than a grizzly bear's claws, it is nonetheless built for stealth. Its wings are broad and rounded, allowing it to maneuver between branches where other raptors would be forced into open air. Its plumage, patterned in bands of black, grey and white, breaks up its outline against shifting light and foliage. The harpy is neither a soaring hunter of the open sky nor a scavenger of carrion. It is a specialist, a canopy predator honed to strike from perches hidden deep in the forest's vaulted ceilings. When it launches, the effect is immediate and violent. The eagle does not glide above its prey. It explodes downward in a controlled burst of acceleration, wings pumping with immense force, talons already extended. A sloth clinging to a branch, relying on camouflage and stillness, may never even register the danger before being wrenched into the air. A monkey, agile and alert, can sometimes spot the threat and scatter with its troop, but the eagle's power allows it to seize victims mid-leap, intercepting movement with speed that belies its massive size. The grip of those talons is crushing, stronger pound for pound than the bite of a lion. Bone snaps instantly, arteries collapse, and resistance ends before it begins. The harpy is not merely a hunter, it is an executioner of the canopy. This violence has purpose far beyond the meal. By preying on medium-sized mammals such as howler monkeys, capuchins, and sloths, the harpy regulates the balance of the canopy itself. Monkeys are voracious feeders, stripping leaves, fruits, and shoots in numbers that can reshape local vegetation. Sloths, slower but persistent, graze steadily on foliage, influencing growth patterns of certain tree species. Without a predator at the top, their populations could surge, stressing the forest's regenerative capacity. The harpy enforces restraint, preventing any single mammal group from dominating the canopy's resources. Its talons, therefore, are instruments of ecological equilibrium. The canopy does not remain lush by accident. It remains lush because sovereignty is enforced from above. The eagle's presence ripples outward through the community. Monkeys develop complex alarm calls to warn of approaching raptors, altering their feeding and travel schedules around perceived risk. Sloths, already masters of camouflage, spend long hours suspended motionless, their fur often coated with algae that masks them further against bark and leaves. Even parrots and toucans, which are not regular prey, adjust their vigilance when the harpy patrols. The predator creates a canopy-wide landscape of fear, an invisible grid of influence that modifies the behavior of dozens of species. In this sense, its rule is psychological as well as physical. Reproduction for such a bird is equally imposing. Harpy eagles are monogamous and invest heavily in raising young. A pair builds a nest that can span 2 meters across, often placed in the fork of an emergent tree towering above the canopy. Into this massive platform, the female lays a single egg. Sometimes a second egg is produced, but typically only one chick is raised, the other serving as insurance should the first fail. The investment is extraordinary. Incubation lasts nearly 2 months, and once hatched, the chick will remain dependent for over a year. Parents deliver sloths and monkeys in steady supply, their talons gripping whole carcasses that are dismembered on the nest. The young bird grows slowly, developing the strength required for a lifetime of predation, and will not breed itself for several years. This deliberate pace means that harpy populations are always fragile. Each pair maintains a large territory, and each generation is a gamble against the risks of predation, starvation, and human disturbance. The eagle's adaptations for canopy life extend beyond hunting. Its feathered legs provide insulation during high-altitude waits, while its facial disc of feathers can funnel sound toward its ears, sharpening auditory sensitivity in dense forest. Its eyes, like those of other raptors, are attuned to movement, able to track a monkey shifting branches more than 100 meters away. Yet despite these refinements, the harpy relies on patience as much as senses. It spends long hours perched motionless, waiting for the right angle, the right opening, the right chance to unleash its crushing dive. Energy is a resource it cannot waste. Like all large predators, its life is a careful arithmetic of risk and reward. For humans, the harpy eagle occupies a symbolic space between awe and threat. Indigenous groups often revere it as a spirit of the forest, a guardian that enforces order from above. Feathers are used in ceremonial dress, and stories circulate of eagles as messengers between worlds. At the same time, its presence near villages can spark fear, as livestock or even small children are imagined as potential targets. While documented attacks on humans are exceedingly rare, the perception underscores its power. Here is a bird capable of ruling not only the canopy, but the imagination. Modern conservationists see it differently still, as a flagship species. To protect the harpy is to protect the emergent trees it requires for nesting, the vast hunting grounds it needs for survival, and by extension, the integrity of the forest canopy itself. The loss of harpy eagles from a region brings measurable consequences. In forests where they have been extirpated by hunting or deforestation, populations of monkeys and sloths expand unchecked, increasing pressure on vegetation. This imbalance cascades downward, reducing fruit availability for birds and insects, altering seed dispersal patterns, and weakening the resilience of the ecosystem. Without its sky apex, the canopy begins to fray. Where the tapir plants seeds from below, the harpy maintains balance from above. Together, these forces preserve the multi-layered complexity of the Amazon. Remove either, and the system starts to unravel. And yet, despite their size and power, harpy eagles are vulnerable. Their dependence on old-growth trees for nesting makes them especially sensitive to logging. A single felled giant can erase a nesting site that has supported generations. Their slow breeding rate means that recovery from population declines is measured in decades, not years. In fragmented forests, where canopy continuity is broken, their hunting strategy falters and they struggle to maintain territories. To save them requires more than protecting individuals. It requires preserving entire skylines of forest, intact enough for an apex raptor to rule. As the day ends and the last light fades, the canopy becomes restless again. Troops of howler monkeys roar in distant trees, their guttural calls reverberating through the forest like drumbeats of defiance. Somewhere nearby, a harpy eagle listens. It does not need to rush. Sovereignty is not declared in noise, but in presence. When it finally launches, the canopy will fall silent, the balance momentarily restored by a predator whose dominion is absolute. The harpy eagle is not merely a bird of prey. It is the sovereign of the sky realm, the counterweight to unchecked consumption, the embodiment of authority in the treetop kingdoms of the Amazon. Where it flies, order follows. Where it vanishes, chaos begins to creep. The canopy may seem eternal, but its survival rests on the silent rule of a hunter with eyes that pierce shadow, wings that split air, and talons that dictate life and death. In the humid air of the Amazon, the forest floor rarely sleeps. Even at midday, when larger animals seek shade, life at ground level continues in tireless motion. Among the most striking spectacles is a parade that looks from a distance like a procession of green fragments moving on their own. Look closer, and the fragments reveal themselves as leaves carried high above the heads of ants. Each worker grips a carefully cut section of foliage, its body dwarfed by the burden, and marches with relentless determination toward a hidden entrance in the soil. These are leaf-cutter ants, and their trails carve invisible highways across the jungle. Their purpose is not consumption, but cultivation. They are farmers, and the fields they tend lie underground. To call them farmers is not metaphor. For over 50 million years, leafcutter ants and their fungal partners have shared one of nature's most enduring mutualisms. The leaves cut from trees are not eaten directly. Instead, they are chewed into pulp and laid carefully into subterranean chambers where a specialized fungus takes root. The ants feed on this fungus, which thrives only in the controlled environment of the nest. Without the ants, the fungus perishes. Without the fungus, the colony starves. What we are witnessing is agriculture, not simply gathering food, but transforming the environment to produce it. Long before humans planted crops, ants were cultivating underground gardens in the soil of the neotropics. The scale of their enterprise is staggering. A mature colony may contain millions of individuals and excavate chambers large enough to rival the volume of a human house. Beneath the forest floor, a labyrinth of tunnels spreads in every direction, ventilated by carefully placed shafts that regulate airflow and humidity. The ants maintain strict hygiene, removing waste to specialized dumps and secreting antimicrobial compounds to suppress competing fungi. Some species even harbor bacterial symbionts on their bodies that produce antibiotics, ensuring the cultivated fungus is protected from pathogens. This layered system of bioengineering demonstrates not only complexity, but foresight, the collective intelligence of a superorganism, ensuring its agricultural foundation remains stable. Above ground, the leafcutters shape the forest in more ways than one. Their relentless harvesting of vegetation may seem destructive, with trees stripped of foliage in a matter of hours. Yet this pruning is not mere consumption. By removing leaves, the ants accelerate nutrient cycling, returning organic matter to the soil more quickly. Their tunnels aerate the ground, improving drainage and oxygenation for plant roots. In effect, they are ecosystem engineers, altering both the chemistry and structure of the soil in ways that benefit countless other organisms. Studies have shown that patches of forest near large colonies often display greater plant diversity and faster growth rates, the byproduct of nutrient enrichment and soil turnover. Where leafcutter ants dig, the ground breathes more deeply. But the ants' influence extends into competition among plants themselves. By targeting certain species of vegetation, they alter the balance of growth in the canopy. Some trees, heavily pruned by ant foraging, struggle to maintain dominance, while others, less palatable to the fungus, gain an advantage. This selective pressure influences not only which plants survive, but which animals that depend on them flourish or decline. In this sense, leafcutters act as regulators of the forest's architecture. Their underground farms are not isolated systems. They are levers that tip the balance of who thrives above. The precision of their foraging reveals another layer of sophistication. Not all leaves are suitable for fungal cultivation. Workers test fragments of vegetation, sometimes discarding them if toxins are detected or if the fungus fails to grow upon them. This trial and error process ensures that only the best substrates are incorporated into the gardens. What looks like mindless cutting is in fact a highly tuned agricultural practice, one that balances risk, resource availability, and fungal productivity. Each worker is part of a feedback loop between plant chemistry, fungal health, and colony survival. Communication within the colony is equally refined. Ants navigate with chemical trails, laying pheromones that mark successful routes and signal urgency when new food sources are discovered. These trails allow the colony to mobilize quickly, deploying vast workforces to exploit abundant vegetation. At times, the forest floor seems alive with streams of ants flowing in opposite directions. One line outbound, shears ready, the other inbound, burdened with harvest. The efficiency is remarkable, a supply chain without overseers, driven instead by distributed intelligence. Each ant follows simple rules, but together they create a logistical system rivaling that of human agriculture. Yet their success comes with costs and vulnerabilities. Colonies demand enormous amounts of vegetation to sustain themselves, up to 20% of the leaf production in some forests. This consumption attracts the attention of predators. Armadillos and anteaters dig into nests, feeding on workers and larvae. Parasitic flies hover over foraging lines, laying eggs on worker ants whose bodies will soon host lethal maggots. Even fungi pose threats. A specialized parasitic species can infiltrate gardens, devastating colonies. The ants respond with relentless maintenance, policing their fungal crops, grooming each other to remove spores, and adjusting nest conditions to stave off invasion. Agriculture, even in the insect world, requires constant defense. What makes leafcutter ants particularly fascinating is how their farming blurs the line between individual and collective. A single worker is expendable, its life measured in weeks. But the colony, which may persist for decades, behaves like an organism in its own right, a superorganism with millions of limbs, multiple castes, and a collective memory written in chemical trails and genetic continuity. Queens, the sole reproductive engines, live for years, founding colonies that can dominate hectares of forest. Workers specialize into roles: foragers, soldiers, gardeners, nurses. Together they sustain a system larger than any single life. In this sense, the leafcutter colony is less an assembly of insects than a living infrastructure core embedded in the soil of the Amazon. The parallels to human society are hard to ignore. Agriculture, urban planning, pest control, even medicine, the ants practice them all, though by instinct rather than invention. Yet while humans cultivate monocultures that often degrade ecosystems, leafcutters maintain a balance, integrating their farming into the wider forest cycle. Their waste enriches soil rather than polluting it. Their pruning stimulates regrowth rather than exhausting fields. Their agriculture, while intensive, is sustainable at a scale honed by millions of years of coevolution. If humans are new farmers, the ants are ancient masters. As dusk settles and the forest shadows deepen, the leafcutter trails remain active. Tiny workers march steadily, carrying emerald shards of the canopy into the earth. To a casual observer, the spectacle may seem small compared to jaguars on the prowl or harpy eagles circling above. Yet the influence of these ants is profound. They shape the soil that trees depend on, regulate the plants that animals feed upon, and sustain a partnership with fungi that predates humanity itself. They are not just farmers, they are engineers, recyclers, and governors of the underground. The Amazon's resilience rests not only on its great predators and majestic herbivores, but also on these tireless insects. Their unseen labor underpins the fertility of the forest, ensuring that nutrients flow, roots breathe, and diversity persists. Without them, the Amazon would be a different place, poorer in growth, weaker in structure, and diminished in its capacity to endure. The leafcutter ants are proof that power in nature does not always roar or soar. Sometimes it whispers underground, in the rustle of countless tiny jaws cutting leaves, and in the quiet bloom of a fungus that feeds an empire. The river's edge is a boundary, neither land nor water, but a shifting zone where both converge. Here capybaras graze on reeds, turtles climb onto sandbanks to bask, and herons step carefully, spearing fish in the shallows. The shoreline looks calm, almost welcoming. Yet in the Amazon, tranquility often masks danger. Beneath the still surface, eyes rise silently from the water, dark and patient. They belong to the black caiman, the largest predator of these waters, a reptilian gatekeeper whose dominion stretches across oxbow lakes and flooded banks. To approach the river's edge without awareness of this presence is to invite execution. The black caiman is a giant among crocodilians, rivaling even the saltwater crocodiles of Asia in size. Adults can exceed 6 meters in length and weigh more than half a ton, their bodies sheathed in black, armor-like scales that shimmer subtly under moonlight. The dark coloration grants camouflage in tannin-stained waters, making them nearly invisible until movement betrays them. Their heads are massive, their jaws lined with conical teeth designed not for chewing but for gripping, holding fast to prey that struggles until exhaustion seals its fate. Every feature of their anatomy is tuned to ambush. They are predators of stillness, storing energy until the exact moment when a surge of explosive power is required. That stillness is deceptive, for beneath it lies the heritage of an ancient lineage. Crocodilians first appeared more than 200 million years ago, long before mammals or even most dinosaurs. The black caiman carries that legacy forward in the Amazon, an apex predator that survived extinction after extinction by refining a strategy of patience and precision. Unlike many hunters that rely on speed or endurance, the caiman thrives on restraint. It can wait for hours or even days in one place, its metabolism low, its body temperature regulated by the warmth of the sun absorbed earlier. This energy economy is the secret to its longevity, enabling it to dominate both droughts and floods. Its hunting strategy is brutally efficient. Capybaras are among its most frequent prey, large rodents that gather in herds along riverbanks. When one ventures too close to the water, the caiman erupts in a burst of force, jaws clamping down with a pressure strong enough to crack bone. Struggling is futile. The caiman drags its victim into deeper water, drowning it in silence. Turtles are also vulnerable, their shells no match for the crushing grip of jaws evolved to crack through armor. Even otters, bold defenders of their families, risk death when a caiman closes the distance in murky water. To many of the forest's animals, the shoreline is not an opportunity but a gauntlet. Every step to drink or feed carries the risk of ambush. Yet the black caiman is not simply a hunter, it is a regulator of space. By patrolling oxbow lakes and slow-moving channels, it restricts access to the shoreline, shaping the behavior of entire communities. Capybara herds adjust grazing patterns, often venturing further from water during peak caiman activity. Birds alter nesting sites to avoid vulnerable stretches of bank. Even other predators, jaguars, giant otters, anacondas, calculate risk when sharing territory with a full-grown caiman. This constant influence transforms the shoreline into a contested frontier, one that only the cautious survive. The caiman's role as gatekeeper is not symbolic. It is enforced daily in the choices of those who must live alongside it. The ecological effects ripple outward. By limiting capybara populations, caimans prevent overgrazing of aquatic vegetation, which stabilizes banks and reduces erosion. By preying on turtles, they indirectly influence plant dispersal, since turtles are important carriers of seeds. By suppressing populations of mid-sized predators, they open niches for smaller competitors. The shoreline ecosystem is therefore not merely shaped by plant growth or seasonal floods, but by the steady, unseen regulation of a reptile waiting in silence. Without the caiman, the balance tips. Too many grazers, too much vegetation stripped, too much disturbance in a system that depends on restraint. Their lives, however, are not without challenges. As ectotherms, caimans rely on external heat sources to maintain body temperature. They bask on mudflats and sandbanks to warm their blood, retreating to water when the sun grows too harsh. This thermoregulation dictates their daily rhythms, with hunting most effective when their bodies are primed by warmth. During cooler nights, their movements slow, and prey animals find temporary reprieve. Seasonal changes also shape their survival. In the wet season, when rivers flood and food becomes widely dispersed, caimans expand their range, hunting across inundated forests. In the dry season, when water retreats into shrinking pools, they congregate in greater numbers, intensifying competition and predation in confined spaces. These seasonal cycles transform the caiman from solitary hunter to dominant presence, the pivot around which riverside life adjusts. Reproduction anchors their role in the ecosystem to the future. Females construct nests of vegetation on riverbanks, mounds that incubate eggs through the heat of decomposition. A single clutch can contain more than 30 eggs, but survival is far from guaranteed. Jaguars, large snakes, and even humans raid nests, and only a fraction of hatchlings reach adulthood. Yet those that do inherit a world already shaped by their kind. From the moment they leave the nest, young caimans must navigate a gauntlet of predators, gradually growing into the role of gatekeepers themselves. Their slow maturation, often taking a decade to reach full size, reflects a strategy of longevity over rapid turnover, a stark contrast to the explosive reproductive strategies of smaller species. Humans, inevitably, have altered the black caiman's story. Once heavily hunted for their skins, populations collapsed in the 20th century, with many regions stripped of their dominant crocodilian. The ecological vacuum that followed revealed their importance. Capybara numbers swelled, riverbanks degraded, and smaller caiman species, such as the spectacled caiman, expanded into niches once held by giants. The absence of the gatekeeper disrupted the shoreline's balance, a reminder that even feared predators serve functions beyond their apparent violence. Conservation efforts have allowed populations to recover in some areas, but the pressures of habitat loss and human encroachment remain constant. Protecting the black caiman is not just about preserving a species. It is about maintaining the architecture of an ecosystem built on regulation and restraint. What sets the black caiman apart from other apex predators of the Amazon, the jaguar, the harpy eagle, the anaconda, is its mastery of threshold spaces. It rules not the open forest, nor the aerial canopy, nor the interior of floodplains, but the margins where life must cross from one domain to another. Every animal that approaches water carries in its instincts the memory of generations lost to ambush. In this way, the caiman governs without constant action. Its authority is not measured in kills alone, but in hesitation, the pause of a capybara before it drinks, the detour of a heron to a safer stretch, the tension in otters as they scan the surface for eyes that may rise at any moment. Power here is not loud. It is patient, still inevitable. As night falls, the shoreline transforms. Frogs begin their chorus, insects hum in dense clouds, and the river reflects the stars in broken fragments. The caiman remains at the water's edge, motionless, save for the slow blink of a reptilian eye. Hours may pass without movement, but the effect is the same. The gate is guarded and entry comes at risk. In a system where every species fights for survival, the caiman embodies the principle of control through presence. The forest is not free to move unchecked. It is bound by the vigilance of its keepers. The black caiman is more than a hunter. It is a sentinel of thresholds, a shoreline executioner, an ancient regulator that enforces balance not by constant violence, but by the possibility of it. Its dominion over riverbanks and oxbow lakes ensures that life at the edge of water is never careless, never unchecked. In the silence of its watch, the Amazon remembers its oldest law. Every crossing has a cost, and the gate is never unguarded. The rainforest floor is never truly still. Beneath the towering buttresses of saber trees and the heavy shadows of strangler figs, an invisible war unfolds at miniature scales. Ants, termites, beetles and spiders compete, forage and defend, their conflicts as decisive to the forest's survival as the hunts of jaguars or the ambushes of caimans. Among them exists one defender whose presence resonates far beyond its size. Barely an inch in length, yet armed with one of the most painful stings in the animal kingdom, the bullet ant patrols its territory with the confidence of a giant. It is not a silent forager or an unseen worker. It is the sentinel of the undergrowth, a microscopic enforcer whose authority extends across the paths of predators and prey alike. The bullet ant's body is sleek and dark, built like a soldier with long, powerful legs that allow it to stride across leaf litter and bark with ease. Its mandibles snap open and shut with precision, tools for grasping and cutting. But its true weapon lies at the tip of its abdomen, a stinger that delivers a venom known for inducing waves of pain so intense that it has been described as akin to being shot. On the Schmidt-Sting Pain Index, which catalogues the agony of insect stings, the bullet ant stands unrivaled at the top. For predators that might consider a raid on its nest, this is not merely a deterrent, but a lesson written into the nervous system. Even animals far larger than the ant will think twice after a single encounter. The venom itself is more than a blunt weapon of pain. It contains ponerotoxin, a neurotoxic peptide that interferes with sodium ion channels in nerve cells. This disruption causes intense, prolonged contractions in muscles and nerves, producing hours of throbbing pain and temporary paralysis in the affected area. For the ant, the effect is twofold. It incapacitates intruders that might threaten the colony, and it creates a lasting memory in would-be predators. Evolution has granted the bullet ant not just a defense, but a psychological weapon, deterrence through unforgettable suffering. In the rainforest, where every creature is locked in a calculus of risk and reward, pain can be as effective a regulator as death. Colonies are scattered across the forest floor and lower trunks, often situated near the bases of large trees. From these strongholds, workers spread outward in foraging lines, gathering nectar, insects and small arthropods. Unlike leafcutters with their spectacular harvests, bullet ants are more discreet, yet their role in the ecosystem is no less significant. They are generalist predators and scavengers, recycling organic matter and preying on small insects that might otherwise proliferate unchecked. Their movements carve corridors through the detritus, and their presence alters the traffic of other species. Smaller ants avoid their patrol zones. Even wandering spiders give them space. To many, the mere scent of their chemical trails is enough to prompt detours. The bullet ant enforces boundaries that ripple through the undergrowth, shaping patterns of movement for creatures far beyond its size. Defense of the colony is absolute. Disturb the nest, and the response is immediate and overwhelming. Workers surge forth in coordinated aggression, clamping mandibles onto skin or bark while driving stingers deep. Unlike bees, which sacrifice themselves with a single sting, bullet ants can sting repeatedly, delivering venom with every strike. This relentless attack makes nest raids extraordinarily costly for most intruders. Anteaters, normally efficient predators of social insects, rarely target bullet ants. The risks far outweigh the caloric rewards. Even birds that feast on smaller ant species tend to pass over these colonies. The bullet ant's ferocity has secured for it a level of security rare in the insect world. Few predators, however desperate, willingly challenge its defenses. But the story of the bullet ant extends beyond biology. In parts of the Amazon, human cultures have long recognized and incorporated its power. Among the Satere-Mawe people of Brazil, young men undergo initiation rituals involving gloves woven with bullet ants. The stings induce hours of excruciating pain, sometimes accompanied by temporary paralysis or hallucinations. The ordeal is repeated many times before a youth is considered a warrior. To outsiders, the practice may seem brutal, yet it reflects a deep cultural acknowledgement of the ant's status as a sentinel of resilience and endurance. Pain becomes a passage, and the bullet ant becomes not just an insect, but a mediator between biology and identity. From an ecological perspective, the bullet ant's sting serves a function similar to that of apex predators at larger scales. Just as the harpy eagle enforces caution in the canopy and the caiman regulates access to shorelines, the bullet ant commands respect on the ground. Its colonies are small fortresses, each one altering the flow of life around it. The consequences of these scattered nodes are significant. By deterring or killing intruders, the ants prevent overpredation of their foraging grounds, creating localized zones of stability. By targeting specific insect prey, they reduce outbreaks that could defoliate plants or spread pathogens. In short, they do not just protect themselves, they shape the dynamics of their neighborhood in the forest's web. Their communication system enhances this influence. Ants lay chemical trails rich with pheromones, directing workers to food or rallying reinforcements to a threat. Alarm pheromones spread rapidly, triggering waves of aggression that can engulf intruders in moments. These signals are invisible but potent, forming an information network that binds the colony into a single defensive unit. For an intruder, attacking one ant is tantamount to attacking all. The colony responds as a body, its millions of neurons distributed across thousands of workers, each ready to fight and die for the whole. The bullet ant is therefore not simply an individual defender, but part of a larger sentinel organism. Even within their ferocity, there are ecological ironies. By staking out aggressive territories, bullet ants leave gaps between colonies that can be exploited by less confrontational species. These interstitial zones become corridors for other ants, beetles, or ground-dwelling spiders. In this way, the bullet ant enforces both exclusion and opportunity, shaping the microgeography of life on the forest floor. Its rule is harsh, but it leaves spaces for diversity to flourish in the cracks of its dominion. Perhaps what is most striking about the bullet ant is how scale does not diminish significance. To see one worker alone is to see little more than a large ant, yet to understand its role is to recognize that power in ecosystems is not measured by size, but by influence. A sting that reshapes predator behavior, a colony that dictates pathways of countless species, a venom that transcends biology to become part of culture. These are marks of sovereignty. The bullet ant is not a giant, but it makes giants hesitate. As dusk deepens, the forest grows loud with the cries of frogs and the hum of insects. Shadows blur along the ground, and many creatures begin their nightly rounds, yet the bullet ant remains vigilant. Its sentinels patrol the nest entrance, antennae probing the air for vibrations, chemical signals, or the approach of danger. They are unyielding, for every ant knows its role is not survival of self, but the security of the colony. A jaguar may rule with stealth, a harpy eagle with talons, a caiman with ambush, but here, in the undergrowth, order is enforced with venom measured in volts of pain. The sentinel stands ready, unseen, yet undeniable. The bullet ant proves that the Amazon's balance is not maintained only by the large or the visible. Sometimes it is held in place by creatures that remind the world that strength is not proportional to size, but to the influence exerted across an ecosystem. And here, on the forest floor, that influence is written in pain, a signal as sharp as lightning, carried in the sting of an inch-long enforcer. The floodplains of the Amazon are worlds of transformation. When rains swell the rivers, forests become oceans. Tree trunks stand like pillars in brown water, currents slip silently between their roots, and animals accustomed to dry ground are forced to navigate a drowned landscape. In this submerged labyrinth, vision is obscured, sound is muffled, and movement itself becomes risky. It is here in the murk and stillness that one of the rainforest's most formidable hunters waits. The green anaconda, the heaviest snake on Earth, is the phantom of the floodplain, a predator that enforces respect not with speed or venom, but with the sheer inevitability of its coil. At first glance, the anaconda seems more myth than animal. Adults commonly exceed 5 meters in length, and some individuals approach 8, their bodies thicker than a man's thigh. Weight can surpass 200 kilograms, making them the undisputed giants of the serpent world. Their olive-green scales are marked with dark ovals, patterns that dissolve into water shadow and vegetation. Eyes and nostrils perch atop the skull, allowing the snake to lie submerged with barely a ripple betraying its presence. This periscopic design is a hallmark of aquatic hunters, a quiet refinement that lets the snake remain hidden while scanning the margins above. Unlike vipers or cobras, the anaconda is not armed with venom. Its strength lies in ambush and constriction. When prey approaches, a capybara venturing for reeds, a caiman basking at the surface, or even a bird skimming too low, the snake strikes with startling speed, jaws unhinging to seize an anchor. Then the coils tighten. Contrary to popular belief, constriction does not crush bones like a vice. Instead, it halts circulation, exerting pressure that collapses veins and arteries, preventing the heart from refilling. Death comes not by suffocation alone, but by a sudden failure of blood flow, a quiet, clinical end imposed by ancient muscle. The anaconda reads its victim's body with precision, loosening its grip only when the heartbeat fades. To watch such an encounter is to witness physiology turned against itself, survival rewritten by pressure. The prey spectrum is broad. Capybaras, turtles, caimans, fish, and even wading birds fall within its grasp. Large mammals such as deer are not beyond possibility. By targeting herbivores, the anaconda indirectly regulates vegetation along floodplain edges. By preying on caimans, it tempers competition among aquatic predators. In this way, the snake's influence runs deeper than its strikes. It redistributes pressure across the ecosystem, ensuring no single population dominates unchecked. The phantom coil is not only an executioner, but a regulator, an unseen force that maintains balance beneath the water's opaque veil. Survival at such massive size requires a distinctive rhythm of life. A large anaconda may feed only a handful of times per year, each meal sustaining weeks or months of fasting. After swallowing prey whole, the snake retreats to still water or shaded banks, its body warming in patches of sun to accelerate digestion. Here, thermoregulation becomes critical. As an ectotherm, the snake's metabolism depends on external heat. A body cooled too quickly digests too slowly, risking decay of the meal from within. A body overheated risks dehydration and cellular stress. To balance these extremes, the anaconda alternates between basking and immersion, using the landscape as a living thermostat. Few predators so clearly demonstrate the daily negotiation between physiology and environment. Their reproductive strategy mirrors their bulk. During breeding season, multiple males may coil around a single female in what is known as a breeding ball. For weeks, the group remains entwined, males vying for position in a slow-motion contest of endurance rather than violence. The female, larger and more powerful, ultimately decides the outcome, mating with the most persistent suitor. Live young are born months later, numbering anywhere from 20 to more than 70, each already equipped to hunt. Most will not survive their first year, falling to birds, caimans, or larger fish. Yet those that endure begin the long ascent toward gianthood, adding coils to a lineage that has ruled these waters for millions of years. Despite their dominance, anacondas are not invulnerable. Jaguars, uniquely adept at hunting large reptiles, occasionally take them by surprise, driving fangs through skull or spine. Humans too have long hunted them, fearing their size or coveting their skins. Habitat loss now poses a subtler threat, as draining of wetlands and fragmentation of floodplains erodes the landscapes they depend upon. A predator built for drowned forests cannot easily adapt to pastures or towns. Their survival is tied to the pulse of the river, to floods that rise and recede in cycles as old as the forest itself. Disrupt that rhythm, and even the phantom may fade. What makes the anaconda remarkable is not only its size or strength, but its invisibility. Unlike crocodilians, which bask openly, or jaguars whose roars echo through the night, the anaconda rules by absence. It is rarely seen until it strikes, its authority written into the caution of animals that approach the water's edge. Capybaras pause before entering shallows. Birds circle higher when shadows move beneath the surface. Even caimans adjust their patrols, wary of rivals too massive to confront. The anaconda's influence is not measured by numbers taken, but by hesitation imposed. It governs not through presence, but through the possibility of presence. Its legend has grown accordingly. Indigenous peoples tell stories of giant snakes, sometimes stretching beyond the realm of biology into myth. The anaconda becomes a river spirit, a guardian or a monster, embodying the fear and respect inspired by a creature both real and elusive. These tales, while not literal accounts, capture an ecological truth. The snake is more than predator. It is a force woven into the fabric of the floodplain. To imagine the Amazon without it is to imagine a system missing one of its deepest regulators. As twilight falls, the floodplain quiets. Insects hum over the water, herons call from distant branches, and the current reflects the last embers of sun. Somewhere in the shallows, a ripple breaks the surface. It is gone as quickly as it appeared, but for those who know the river, the meaning is clear. The phantom coil is moving, unseen, shaping the night's hunt and the balance of the ecosystem in equal measure. The anaconda stands as the floodplain's final regulator, a predator that embodies the patience of water and the inevitability of muscle. It does not chase, it does not roar, it does not announce itself. It waits, it measures, it constricts, and in that silence lies its power. To step into its domain is to enter a world where the edge between safety and death is as thin as a ripple on still water, a world ruled by the phantom of the coil.